For years now, an increasing number of the country's leaders have been encouraging the formation of charter schools. Now, these are schools established by parents and communities that have the freedom to come up with their own curriculum. Advocates say they're a better way to teach, but now, for the first time, an independent study has concluded charter schools have been largely oversold. Joining us now from Los Angeles, the author of that study, Professor Amy Stewart-Wells of UCLA's Graduate School of Education. And from Washington, Jeanne Allen. She is president of the Center for Education Reform. Good morning to you both.
Good morning.
Good morning.
All right, let's start with President Clinton, because a couple of months ago he said he wanted to triple the number of charter schools there are in the country, provide more money for them as well. And he said at that time that he supported charter schools because they're open to all students regardless of background or ability and given great flexibility in exchange for high levels of accountability. So, Amy, let me ask you, on those two issues, open to all students and high levels of accountability, what did you find?
Well, actually, that really varies from state to state. In California, our state law says that charter schools can have admissions criteria. And what we found, 75% of the charter schools in the state have some kind of criteria, either on student behavior codes or parent contracts. That relate to how students are admitted to charter schools. And in terms of accountability, we found that it's very difficult to hold charter schools or any public schools accountable in the state. We have no statewide test that's been consistent since we passed the charter school legislation. And also the charters themselves often are a little vague on what the outcome should be for students.
So accountability, though, is a pretty central issue. I mean, who are the charter schools accountable to, and what kind of things do they or do they not report?
Well, I actually think that's a great question, Kevin, if I can jump in there.
Sure.
Charter schools are supposed to be accountable fundamentally to the children, which is what all public education should be accountable for. And in more than a couple of dozen larger studies and multi-state studies that have much more evidence and research to them than Dr. Wells' study, we found just the opposite. In fact, in those studies you find lots of learning, lots of parental involvement, lots of teacher satisfaction and autonomy, and on top of it, a great benefit in terms of attendance, less discipline. And so there's a win-win right now in over 1,100 charter schools across the country. Accountability is the key, and that's why charter schools were started, to try to help reinvigorate public education and bring it back to that excellent system we all want.
But Professor Wells, how do they measure accountability? What did you find?
Well, we find that there are several different measures that are, being considered. I mean, first of all, there's the state test, and then there are issues around, our charters are granted through the local school districts. And so there's things that are stated in the charter proposals about what these schools will be held accountable to. But that's where we found in our in-depth study of California that there are difficulties in terms of how the districts know how to hold these schools accountable. Some of the language in the charters are very vague, and it's very difficult to say whether they've met these benchmarks at the end of 5 years when they need to be renewed.
All right, and just to remind people, the accountability issue is important because that's one of the things that President Clinton says is the reason that charter schools exist. Another is that there were promises that kids could do better through a charter school than they can through the public system. So, Professor Wells, just quickly, did you find that that was true, that children are getting a better education in charter schools than in the existing system?
Well, I think it's really a mixed bag. I mean, the charter school movement itself is very diverse. There are some schools that are doing some innovative things. There are other schools where the curriculum is less innovative, where students are not necessarily doing any better. The problem is we don't have any benchmarks or really accountability measures to measure some of it.
But we can't say that based on a study of 17 schools, when in fact we have over 500 schools that have been studied in over 49 studies across this country. And what we're finding is that 250,000 families whose children are attending charter schools across this country are having an impact not only on their kids, but more importantly, on public education as a whole. Let's face it, we should be asking the question, how best do we educate our children? And the one-size-fits-all system we have has given us dismal results in our urban areas.
But I think one of the things that Professor Wells found, though, is that some charter schools are having a lot of trouble making ends meet financially, and they have to go out to the private sector. I mean, let me ask you, Jeanne Allen, I mean, are some schools struggling, and does that mean that they're doing less than the public school would otherwise provide?
Actually, they're struggling with less, but still doing more with less, and the efficiency claims that she found are absolutely patently false, because what they do is they put administrators to work. They put teachers working in all aspects of the curriculum, and they use parents in ways that most public schools don't use parents. If you want to stop, however, the struggle, most most charter school folks across this country will tell you, stop underfunding them. And that's what legislatures are doing, because they're fought by studies like this and people who don't want to see this kind of positive change, and so they get less money than public schools. Let's give them as much money as the other public schools, and then we'll see them really not have those obstacles.
I just want to move on just in the last 30 seconds, and let me ask Professor Wells this from the schools that you looked at. If people are considering charter schools, what should they look for?
Well, I think that parents need to be very tuned into the fact that charter schools are doing a lot of different things out there, and that people who are engaging in this reform are trying to accomplish different things. I mean, Jeanne Allen and her center have an agenda to move the system towards vouchers and privatization, when actually a lot of people
that is such a false
in
claim.
the charter school movement are not interested in moving in that direction. They're very committed to public education, and so I think buyers need to be aware, the parents need to be aware that there are different agendas out there in charter school reform, and that people are trying to accomplish different ends through this
And the buyer
movement.
needs to be aware that this is one of the healthiest, most diverse reform movements that don't see charters as an end of yourself. You're right, Amy. What they see is they see it as a reinvigoration of public education. And the agendas only come from people who don't want to help parents find the right choices. Kevin, the answer to your question is look for good curriculum, look for standards, look for quality teachers, and you'll know whether it's charter, public, or private if that's the school for your child.
Jeanne Allen, thank you. Professor Amy Stewart Wells as well. We appreciate you being on the program this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you.